Joel is okay.
Joel.
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 I think I was using you and then Wilhelm.
Chris, just call me Chris. Christopher Leon, and then Chris.
Joel. Yes. So, just 1 minute. Just
Hello?
Yep.
Yep. How many cops have you?
I've only been to 4 COPs. How many have you been to?
8 so far, I think. Well, 6 was from within, managing the whole
Oh,
circus.
I know. I cannot believe what you've
Uh,
seen.
hi again.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Seen. Is it feel good to like
It
be
does,
here
it does,
and
absolutely.
just watch them and be like,
So
A lot of
we'll
a lot of
start
performance
our
that exhausts me, so I do a lot of
session.
right?
so nice to breathe fresh air.
Again, it's a silent session, so you have to put your headphones to hear the conversation. So this particular panel conversation is going to focus on the greenhouse gas protocol, and we have on the panel 3 people who are very well informed in that space. From my right, we have Mr. Samrad, Ms. Catherine Atkins, and Mr. Christopher Lilholm. So the conversation today will start first from remarks from the panel to basically give an indication of different positions on greenhouse gas protocol, and then we get to some questions. And we invite also questions from the audience, should you have questions for this panel about the protocol. So first I'll start with Mr. Samad, who is the steering committee vice chair on the greenhouse gas protocol, and formerly the deputy executive secretary for the UNFCCC. Mr. Samrad, over to you.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure for me to hear. First of all, thank you to World Green Economy Organization for organizing this session and hosting us. So thank you, WGEO. And Joel, thank you very much for moderating this session, and it's a pleasure to be here with the other panelists. So, brief introduction, GHG Protocol is an extremely important tool in the first step of addressing climate change as we know it, and that's why we are all here in COP29 in Baku. It's about reducing emissions, it's about getting to net zero, it's about cleaner, greener, more sustainable environment that we all want. So what Greenhouse Gas Protocol does is provides the tools for all stakeholders, be it in private sector or public sector, to measure their greenhouse gas emissions. That is the first essential step in taking proactive and concrete actions in reducing their emissions. And in doing so, one has to be absolutely clear and make sure that it is done in a transparent way with full of integrity and credibility and zero tolerance to greenwashing. And the Greenhouse Gas Protocol is something that has been in existence for about 15, 20 years, and major corporations around the world, and including many government entities, use it as the first tool in their journey of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by first measuring where they are, what they're doing.
I think we'll come back to you again on the question on transparency in that process, but we'll go to Catherine here for introductory remarks.
Well, thank you, and I do want to thank WGEO for this session today, and just for the amazing, high quality, thought leadership that they've been providing here in the Blue Zone. I've had a chance to be part of a couple of different conversations, and I'm excited. it seems a little nerdy when you say GHG protocol and you're excited about the conversation, but I'm here to share with all of you that the GHG protocol is the foundation for the climate economy. And so any stakeholder that wants to be part of that, that wants to inform climate action, to build carbon markets, is going to need to understand how to measure the GHG emissions associated with companies and the efforts that they make. So this is really kind of, this is the meat and potatoes. I'm here at COP, I should probably say tofu and potatoes of this conversation. So I'm Catherine Atkin. I'm an attorney from California. And so I have come to spend a lot of time studying the GHG protocol, mainly as my work focuses on building the enabling environment for the climate economy and the recognition that we're not going to do that. We're not going to monetize GHG emissions unless we have ways to measure them and to give the public, investors, and companies confidence that we're all comparing, like to like. And so as I worked in California about 5 years ago, many of us around the world were looking at the use of the GHG protocol, which has been the standard, the first place you go when you want to measure GHG emissions for decades. At the same time, we were recognizing that up to recently, that was really a voluntary affair, right? Companies could decide to do it. They could decide how they wanted to do it, what part of the protocol they wanted to implement. And so what really makes the GHG protocol critical now is that it has become the throughput to all reporting regimes globally. And these are mandatory regimes for corporate disclosure, and that's really the foundation, as I said, for decarbonizing the globe and driving climate economy and carbon markets. So in California, I had a chance to develop a bill to require GHG emissions reporting by the country's largest private and public companies that do business in California. And as part of drafting that, we took the GHG protocol and put it right into the law. We said, hey, this is not difficult. You do the GHG protocol and you're set in California, and you're going to be good wherever you are globally, because that is that's the foundation, that's the touch point. So for me, it was very practical. It's a way for us to create uniformity and ensure corporations are not burdened and that we get good data. So I have also the honor of being on the technical working group for the GHG protocols update, and Mr. Samad is obviously leading that effort, and so really glad to be with you today.
Thanks, Catherine. Then we'll go to Lilham, who's a global head of sustainability and head of key accounts for management.
Thank you, Joel, for moderating us today and for hosting us. And thanks for the World Green Economic Organization for setting up this session. And thanks to the distinguished panelists that are here with us today. So I am a global head of ESG and sustainability. I have assumed this role from a commercial function of heading our key account management function. So I am not the most technical one in the GHG protocol, but I know how much it matters for our clients. And you said it well right before. You said what you can't measure, you can't monetize. So I think it's very important for our clients here. If I may say something, I think we have a lot of technical experts in our organization in DNV as verifiers and doing carbon accounting and helping our clients work with the protocol. And I'm sure they'll be envious by sitting next to you with all your depth and seniority in this domain. So if I may say a couple of things around DNV, we exist for 160 years with a legacy starting from Maritime Classification Society, and then we have evolved. If to bring it in short form, we are de-risking businesses and projects and helping also de-risking financial decisions. And measurement and trust in the measurement is critical for doing that.
All the three panelists, I think those are very resourceful comments, because you're seeing the aspect of policy, aspect of integration with practice. You're seeing conversations about finance and financial mechanisms for this. But so I'd like us to go in a bit of questions. And I think first one is about leadership. How can the industry actually lead this process, it foster systemic change towards achieving sustainability when you're making a reflection on the GHG protocol. So how do we lead? What is the leadership space with this? And that, Mr. Sarmad on this.
Thank you very much. Yes, and indeed. But before getting into the question, I'd like to once again thank Catherine and what they have done in California by legislating greenhouse gas protocol into their business environment to make sure that that is used. Remember, California is the 5th to 6th largest economy of the world, and that is the leadership. That's what we're looking for corporates and governments, subnational governments, and across the board to start with credible basis on which they can measure what they set out to do and do it in a credible and transparent fashion. And that's what Greenhouse Gas Protocol provides. And the leadership in this is very clear. I've been in many boards, and this is what I recommend to the board. At the board level, everyone need to make sure that sustainable business environment, sustainable supply chains in their corporations are front and center of their decision making. Not as a side thing that tick a box, but really to make sure that that is drilled down and up and down the supply chains to make sure that all their emissions, Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions are adequately covered and there are concrete actions. And not just at that level, but then to also carefully and regularly monitor those. It is not just one-off event at 31st December when the accounts are closed and you do the reporting, but no, it has to happen throughout the supply chains and throughout the year for that matter. So leadership is really critical and important, and when that is done properly, corporations stand to benefit enormously by the trust that they create, by the integrity that they provide to their products and services. The clients, and especially the younger generation around the world, are demanding, are looking at what the corporate world is doing, and they will then make sure that they will then either reward or punish depending on where they go in their leadership journey.
Yeah, thanks for that, Samrat. And I wanted to jump to Lilham in this regard. So you are from an actual industry player, and I'm wondering, are there strategies that you're putting in place to lead this kind of space?
Well, we are definitely helping the industry players. We are an independent third-party organization that works closely with our clients to build trust in their endeavors to meet and adhere to standards and principles. The advantage of the GHG protocol, it is the high adoption rate. So it's well recognized throughout any geography and any sector we work with within our client engagements. The depth of which and the scope of which we work with clients may differ a little bit where we are in the world, but I think when we speak to a large organization and we talk about GHG, they know what it is. GHG also becomes embedded in reporting frameworks. Yes, like you mentioned before, it's not only the volunteer effort to understand your baseline, but it's also an effort to comply with your reporting requirements.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think leadership is companies that put more effort into being accurate about what they report and not relying on averages. So I think that would be leadership in my view.
Thanks for that. Just speaking into us, Catherine, you know, in your work, you make reference as this space as a way of catalyzing the adoption. So can you give a comment on this? Because as we are leading, they are definitely a catalyst towards going towards this institutionalization of the GHG protocol.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would just say, companies, there's some amazing companies that have been on the sort of the front end of this. And I think in any change management, kind of dynamic, which is what we're all doing. We're all having to move from our legacy economy to a clean and sustainable economy, and then that takes work. And so it has been great to see the leading companies, and then also to realize that the point of reporting requirements and regimes is also for the big middle. that for whatever reasons is, just starting the journey. And I think the importance of making it simple and doable is really, that is the driver. And so one of the things that's really important about the GHG protocol is that we create an on-ramp for companies of all sizes. So I do think that is a really important feature. And I think right now I'd have to say we have not democratized access to the tools and resources for companies of all sizes to use the GHG protocol to get a baseline. So I think that's, we're talking a lot at COP about equity, that we have to not only create the drivers, but we have to make sure that nobody gets left behind. So I think leadership in this next phase of the work is to say we've laid the foundation, and what are the supports we need to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be a winner in the new economy that we're building. I would just also say the GHG protocol, the way you're going to see it in other countries is going to be through what's called the ISSB IFRS standard. So you might not see, more than 30 countries are considering the adoption or have adopted the ISSB standard. It's a new sustainability standard, just released 18 months ago. So when you see that, which is what a lot of countries are now going to be contending or considering, the GHG protocol is the base layer for the GHG accounting. So what we need is policies and continual leadership by countries so that the whole globe is doing the same thing together. And I think, we're seeing that in Europe. We're trying to do our part in the United States and California, and then all the countries around the world, including, some of those I'm sure where you all come from, are now considering how do we become part of a competitive global economy? How do we get ourselves ready?
Yeah. And I think just building on the ISSB question, Catherine, if you could just start us off on these innovative practices. What would you consider to be these innovative practices that industry can actually adopt to significantly reduce emission or basically reduce their carbon footprint?
Okay, so great question. And it really, when you look at kind of where emissions are concentrated, they're really, if you think about the sort of iceberg of carbon, right? The part underneath the surface, there's a little triangle, right, which is kind of corporations scope 1 and 2, the big companies, but really the supply chain is where all the, most of the carbon is. And we know that 90+% of most large companies' footprint is in their supply chain. So that is going to be critical, which is how do the suppliers in those supply chains begin to think about what's their understanding what your baseline GHG emissions is and getting the resources and support to make those calculations, and then figuring out what's the low-hanging fruit. What are the easy things you can do? Certainly, one is renewable energy. In any economy, renewable energy is the driver of the largest reduction immediately. So, working in your local jurisdiction with your national governments, and national governments seeing their role is to support their local economy to be competitive, and in order to do that, they need to get corporations starting to get in rooms to think about how do we get solar and wind, how do we make those things available. So it can't just be on the suppliers to figure it all out themselves. These are systemic issues, but certainly looking at the ways in which your business processes, how your own suppliers, what kinds of products they're giving to you, and just creating a community of problem solvers.
Great. I'll go back to Mr. Samrat here. In your experience and being part of these processes, have you come across very innovative practices? Just building on that.
Absolutely. I think, as Catherine already mentioned, it has to be done up and down the supply chains, and essentially it's about optimizing the energy use. And there are many options available to corporate worlds. I mean, wind, solar, and hydropower and so on. So that needs to be really integrated in the energy mix wherever that is suitable, and there are definitely many opportunities. And with the advent of artificial intelligence and the digital tools that are available, those need to be put to good use, and every corporation around the world can use that, optimize their supply chain energy usage, and prevent waste. And because there is also a lot of waste in terms of how energy is optimally used, and so therefore there are many opportunities out there, and each of those provide huge, I strongly believe, economic opportunities for the corporate world that need to be capitalized. And let me also mention right now, as we are here in COP29 in Baku, what happened on the first day, the adoption of the 6.4 of Paris Agreement on the voluntary carbon markets. That will provide now a huge boost to the private sector to start measuring their emissions, because that's what would allow them to then start coming into the market and trading those emissions or their credits. And greenhouse gas protocol is definitely one of those tools to help them fully capitalize and optimize their actions.
Yeah, I think just building on that, I want to come to Lilham, because you've introduced a question that we also want to explore, and that is about incentives. So Lilham, I don't know if you could think about these innovative practices, but also some incentives that can enhance the adoption in the private sector and from industry in general.
Great. I think the incentive was well presented by Uvas before. I think if we see the adoption of a 6.4, yes, they will have to measure their emissions to trade them. So definitely that can be a driver, but there can also be other drivers that we will see that companies are seeking in their reporting. They are seeking to reduce their scope 3 emissions. So suppliers who are supplying into those companies will have an incentive in order to be able to supply or to compete in this. They also have to demonstrate that they know their emissions and that they are doing actively something to reduce them. Yes, supply chain is the big elephant in the room. Plus 90% of the emissions are in the scope 3. And so we in DNV, we have a big focus, and I'm from a department or division called Supply Chain and Product Assurance, which is really about also being able to verify things that are in various locations and in various different contexts. And bringing trust into the equation here is critical. Suppliers are very fragmented for large organizations to manage, and I think we can provide a fair service of trying to consolidate this data. And the advantage here is the GHG protocol is a common and accepted framework. It would be far more difficult to achieve the same things if everyone had their own way of measuring. So I think the incentive here is a common platform where everyone can see a good outcome of adhering towards it and doing some action about it and decarbonizing.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Just building on that, if you could just think about what are some of these long-term economic benefits, because we are looking at it, getting into this place, but long-term, are there specific economic benefits that people are likely to get from adhering into this?
Most certainly. So I think I will quote something from yesterday here from the World Climate Summit. So basically companies that actively decarbonize, and actually decarbonize meaning changing either the product, the business model, driving new innovation, new technology, reducing waste, they are outperforming 2.7% their peers who are not doing it. Those companies who are not actually reducing emissions, but that's talking about pure advocacy, about wanting to do it, they are underperforming. So I think as a business continuity, it's critical to decarbonize. We want to be here as a third party, help companies accelerate a responsible and credible decarbonization. And for us, the credibility factor is key. We need to decarbonize. It's a planetary urgency, it's a business urgency. And credibility is the enabler that will build the trust to make it happen.
Great. I don't know if, Catherine, you want to make a comment on this, and also if there's any risk to some of these companies, getting into this space, based on your experience in California.
Yes. Great point about driving innovation, and I did want to say that not only will, measuring your GHG emissions, and to be honest, most companies, very few have been really measuring their entire footprint. So once that footprint's out there, it's going to be a big number. And when we worked in California on this disclosure law, it wasn't because we want to make make corporations do things. It was because the only way to create a driver for decarbonization and markets is for us to create value for them in doing it. And so I do think not only will it drive decarbonization, but when a company has to decarbonize, they need other low carbon solutions. And so we really need the climate tech companies. I was seeing in California a lot of great innovation that really has been struggling because large corporations, they knew they had this issue, but they didn't really feel urgency to really invest in a big way. They might do a pilot, but what it takes to actually scale it. So what we're already seeing is that when companies know that they're going to need to do this, maybe they call that climate tech company back and say, let's actually do more than just a pilot. Let's really try to scale. So I think for people in the audience and places where you live, I think that there is a whole green economy and solution set that will be driven by this that I think is really powerful. And I think that's also where jurisdictions need support so that local businesses can be the winners in this new economy.
Samrat.
Yeah, just to add to what's already been said, there are 2 points in this part of the discussion. One is we all remember what happened to Kodak, BlackBerry, Nokia, and this is the writing on the wall for corporate world. If they don't decarbonize, if they don't do the right thing in getting on the right side of sustainable business practices, they will run out of they'll go out of business. And second point is that if they want to attract talent, if they want to be competitive in their supply chains and in their corporate boardrooms and employment sector, they need to show what they're doing. They really need to be ahead of the curve in order to attract that right kind of talent. I've spoken to many students and graduates, young graduates. They are now looking at where they want to go, who they want to work for. So make sure that the corporate world, and not just the corporate world, but also the public sector, they need to make sure that they are on the right side of history and do the right thing beyond politics.
Doing the right thing and being on the right side of history. I don't know if there are any comments, questions from the audience in this regard. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It's an eye-opener for me. I work with the government in Nigeria, and what I've learned today is that if we have companies or anyone wanting to work with us from the north, for example, we'd be asking what and how they are implementing the GHG protocol. So we would make sure that we write this into our policies, at least where I work, to ensure that companies don't just come and greenwash us. I mean, if you say you're working in sustainability, the least you can do is to have GHG protocol going on in your company. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Yeah, thanks for that. I don't know if there's any other reactions at the back. In the meantime, if you have other questions or comments, please. Okay, I'll come to you after.
Thank you for those insights. 3 questions, and I think most of them have already been tackled. One is on the incentive bit, and just to ask what are some of the resources and tools that are available to just help companies, organizations to just adopt to the protocol. And then 2, to just give, and I think the examples have been given by they have been given on, I think, the Nokia examples, the fails that have been faced during the process. So how can organizations best implement the standards and ensure that there is accurate reporting and accounting through the implementation of the protocol? And then the last one on the future plans. And I think some of the things that stay under the carpet is because of misinformation or lack of it. Therefore, how can stakeholders stay informed about the updates and continuous monitoring and evaluation for the protocol, and how it can be best practice? So those are my questions.
Thanks. We'll take one more and then we'll come back to the panel. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, panelists. Very insightful discussion. I am Kshitij. I am a public policy student from India, and I'm specializing in ESG. And I've read some reports of various corporates in their ESG reporting and their sustainability reports. But when it comes to supply chain emissions of Scope 3, they're not quite proactive, and they give the reasons of lack of account. Counting and very broad frameworks when it comes to Scope 3. So when can we see some right intent coming in and some proactive measures by companies and not neglecting the Scope 3 emissions, which are quite broad and really have an impact outside their companies?
Yeah, thank you very much for those very interesting questions, and really appreciate the encouraging remarks and comments that have been made. Reflecting on some of the points that you all have made, starting with when can we see on the Scope 3. I think it's a question of making sure that you raise awareness across the board and get actors both up and down the supply chain to do the right thing, as I mentioned. And that is not an easy task, but that's what, as I mentioned, that's what needs to be taken up at the board, at the chief executive level. So I see that is happening, but like in many other aspects of addressing climate change, the pace and the intensity of that action needs to be accelerated. So that is extremely important, and we need to continue to do that. With regard to the other question, what we are doing in GHG Protocol is we have established a very robust governance structure around the protocol to ensure that its updates and its implementation happens in a very coordinated and a transparent fashion, and you will see a lot more progress and implementation of help with the implementation in the tools and the guidance that will be provided by the steering committee, the independent standard board, and the technical working groups, of which Catherine is a active member. So we are working on all of that, and so please watch that space. You will get a lot more feedback, information, and tools that would be available to all our stakeholders for them to take forward and implement it in a easy to understand and a very wide manner. Catherine?
Okay, those are great questions, and I really appreciate your, recognition of that. This is a really important. It's sort of like something that standards. Oftentimes, people don't really. They think, how important is the standard? And I think we're seeing here that carbon markets, the climate economy, it's faltering because people don't have confidence that what companies are saying that they're doing. And so it is really important for us to quickly regain the confidence of investors, of consumers. And so in terms of the, how to think about it in your jurisdiction, I mean, some of you sound like you're in leadership, positions. I do think that going back, and for those of you that maybe aren't in those positions, going back into your local jurisdiction and the ISSB as being this new standard that many countries are adopting, that has the GHG protocol as a standard within it. Many of them are having conversations at the political level at your stock exchange level about creating either voluntary or mandatory reporting. So I think getting yourself in that conversation. And then in terms of resources, I know the GHG protocol has a lot of resources like webinars, and there's certificates out there that you can get for relatively low cost to be able to say that you're somebody that knows how to do GHG accounting using the GHG protocol. I think there is a big capacity development and equity issue with making sure that the next generation of assurance providers, I mean, Chris can't do it all over the world. Like, we need a whole new set of people. So I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, most certainly. There is definitely going to be a need for assurance to bring the sufficient amount of trust into this. But it's also worthwhile to add that we are also facing improved digital tools. I think there was a question before around it. I mean, maybe to understand your initial measures and build the early foundation And you can find some tools out there that are maybe cost effective to begin with. And then over time, as you are going to report on it or you're going to decide upon it, you can build more trust in it, and you can come to companies such as ours and ask for verification of the data. But yeah, building your initial foundation, I think that there exists some quite good guidance and digital tools, maybe quite accessible actually. And then there will be also other new mechanisms, or new, not mechanisms, but rather enablers like AI to help also speed up some of this. So maybe in the future will be even easier. I think that the key point still remains. As long as it's a common set of ways that we look at things, it's much more easy to discuss this at a global level. And I think we are very privileged to have such a protocol. Because if we wouldn't, it would be a very difficult conversation to have if we all understood it in very different ways. You had a comment about adoption, about the scope 3. Yes, it's true. It's not yet fully there, but for the companies, it will be their scope 1 in some point. So over time, the big middle will take place. I heard one when we look at the incentives and on the investor side. So I heard one talking from LSEG, and what they do is they made a report and they say, well, out of the 15 categories in the scope 3, typically around 2 or 3 categories make up 80%. So if you want to get started, you can start with the most significant or the most material ones and understand those. And maybe that can be some guidance. At least that was the investors' viewpoint, that when they looked at companies, they try to assess the big bulk there. So.
Yeah, and I think the direction of the conversation is clearly that this is something we need to think about now. This is something we need to reflect about. There are different challenges, and standardization, transparency, and trust are going to be key to make it a success. We have a moment for just 2 more comments. Going once. Gone. Now I'll come back to the panelists, just closing remarks, if you have any closing remarks.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you and again World Green Economy Organization and the audience for their interest. And my closing remarks would be that we need to really accelerate and intensify the climate actions that we all need to take collectively, and do everything in our capacity. The change starts with us, and many of you are in leadership position, influencing decisions in different parts of the sectors of the society. So you need to do that, and the tools such as the greenhouse gas protocol, and similar tools around that are available, you need to make sure that those are utilized in the best possible manner.
I would just say, yes, thank you so much, and thank you for your expert moderation. I would also say I come here, as an attorney that's worked on legislation, but we didn't get that passed in California without advocacy and without civil society. So none of this happens. Everything in this blue zone is really impacted by how much there's urgency. And so I think when it comes to creating a democratizing access to the tools, to those software tools and other capacity building, so that everybody gets a chance to be part of the climate economy, is also an advocacy effort. And so I encourage you to be voices for access to these tools, and so that we can all rise together.
Well, thank you for great moderation, and thanks for the distinguished panelists for this great discussion, and also thanks for the great questions on the possible adoptions and challenges in adoptions linked to this. And also, I think it's a good way forward for you to try to bring more awareness and leadership into working with this protocol. There's a GHG emission protocol, and then there are other let's say product-centric disclosures as well, and it all comes together in trying to help promote more environmentally healthy choices, and I think that's what it's all about. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we appreciate the moderators, for the panelists, for having a very good conversation with us.